Hey guys, tonight we take a long, slow walk into a world that vanished thousands of years ago, but left behind some of the most mysterious artifacts in the ancient world. You find yourself wandering through a misty lowland jungle, the air thick with moisture, and the low hum of frogs doing their best jazz impression. Your shirt sticks to your back, there's mud on your sandals, and just ahead, looming out of the fog like something from a lost civilization's fever dream, is a giant stone head. It stares at you, not angrily, not kindly, just unbothered, like a coach watching a team that refuses to listen. Calm, stoic, massive. This is Olmec country, and if you're wondering how you ended up in a swamp with a 40-ton face giving you the side eye, don't worry. We're going to take it slow, one mossy, bug-sprinkled step at a time. You probably wouldn't survive long here barefoot. The ground is squishy, the heat is relentless, and the wildlife is not interested in your sleep schedule. But tonight, it's okay. You're here to listen, not run. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're already cozy under a blanket, post your location and what time it is where you're listening. I love seeing where this sleepy little history community stretches across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The jungle breathes around you. The trees rise in thick tangles, their roots bulging like coiled rope. Everything is damp. Your footsteps squelch through soil that's more soup than dirt. And then it appears again, another one of them. A colossal stone head. This one has a different expression. Brow furrowed, lips pressed just slightly. It looks annoyed, like someone asked it to smile for a photo, and it deeply resents the concept of cameras. These heads are the Olmec's greatest legacy, 17 of them discovered so far, all carved from volcanic basalt, all weighing between 6 and 40 tons, and all just there, watching, unmoving, dignified, and no one left a note. Not a single glyph or inscription explaining why. Classic Olmec. The fog curls around your ankles as you keep walking. In the distance, the low hills rise, barely hills. Really, more like mounds. But some of those mounds are man-made. Ancient platforms buried in vines and soil. The cities of the Olmec weren't built to last like Roman ruins. They were made from earth, clay, wood, and dreams. Dreams that hardened into stone faces. You pass a half-fallen tree, covered in mushrooms the size of dinner plates. One of them drips lazily onto your shoulder. Gross, but part of the vibe. The air here smells of wet leaves and something earthy, almost sweet, like plantain peels and history. And again, another head. They're spaced strangely, not in neat rows or obvious ceremonial lines. Some are grouped, some isolated. Some were even found buried. One theory: they were intentionally hidden by the Olmec when times got rough. Another theory: they were just tired of being stared at by their own statues and needed a break. Historians still argue whether the heads represent rulers, athletes, warriors, or deities. Some say they're memorials to kings. Others think they might be giant commemorative busts for ball game champions like MVP trophies, but, several tons heavier. You pause to look closely at this one. The helmet is intricately carved. The lips are full, the eyes deeply set. No two heads are the same. Each is its own character, realistic, human, detailed in a way that suggests someone was very proud of capturing every curve of a nose, every fold of a brow. But still, no writing, no names. You move on. The path curves toward a shallow swamp, and the hum of insects rises to a gentle roar. You spot a crocodile's eyes glinting from the water. It doesn't blink. Neither do the stoneheads. There's something poetic about that, but your brain's starting to feel soft around the edges. This whole region, the Gulf Coast lowlands of what is now Veracruz and Tabasco, was once the beating heart of Olmec civilization. From around 1500 BCE to 400 BCE, this swampy stretch of Mesoamerica was home to a culture that built cities, developed art, and likely influenced every major civilization that followed. But unlike the Maya, they didn't build grand pyramids of stone. Unlike the Aztecs, they didn't leave codices. What they left were hints, symbols, and those massive, silent heads. You arrive at a clearing. In the center, a head sits half buried in earth, its features barely visible beneath a layer of moss. You sit in front of it, quiet now. The world shrinks to you in this ancient face. What was this place? Who carved these? Why here, of all places? A swamp where your feet make squishy sounds, and the bugs are having a party. And why, in the name of all things sensible, did they make the head so big? These are the questions we'll wander through tonight, not to find final answers, but to enjoy the wondering itself, the squinting into foggy history, the slow realization that sometimes a mystery is exactly the point. And the Olmec? They were excellent at leaving mysteries. You rise from the mossy earth, brushing off your legs, though frankly, at this point, your pants have given up. The humidity clings to you like a needy friend. It's like breathing through a warm towel. Still, the jungle road stretches onward, wide enough for foot traffic, trade, and maybe the occasional priest dragging a bucket of jade to a ceremony. Your journey winds toward the outskirts of what was once an Olmec village. You wouldn't know it right away. No high walls or fortress gates, no paved roads. But as you squint through the underbrush, you spot the faint outlines of raised platforms houses once sat there, made of wattle and daub, their roofs thatched with palm leaves. The kind of buildings that disappear fast, like a popsicle in the sun. But the people, they stayed for centuries. A little stream trickles nearby, weaving its way past a fire-blackened hearthstone, now half swallowed by roots. You imagine an Olmec woman crouched there in the early morning, grinding maize on a metate of flat, grinding stone. The rhythmic scrape of stone on stone, a sound passed down through generations like a lullaby. She's making a corn porridge that's a little too bland, a little too sticky, but deeply sacred. In a world without refrigerators or Uber Eats, this was the stuff of life. And not just any life ritualized life. In Olmec culture, food wasn't just survival. It was symbolic. Maize wasn't just a crop. It was a gift from the gods, the very flesh of humankind. If you didn't pay it the proper respect, well, it might not grow next season. And the gods, they had opinions. You step past the hearth and head deeper into the residential zone. Things get muddier. This is lowland living, after all. Dense, waterlogged terrain that grows everything and tries to rot it just as fast. The Olmec were swamp dwellers by design, and they made it work. Their cities weren't built for tourists. They were arranged around drainage systems, clever little channels carved through clay that diverted rainwater, kitchen runoff, and whatever else you didn't want pooling under your house. Historians still argue whether the Olmec actively chose the swamp for strategic purposes, proximity to trade routes, spiritual symbolism, or if they just adapted to what they had. Either way, they made mud work, and you're walking through the living memory of that stubborn ingenuity. You pause under a ceiba tree, sacred to the Maya, and likely to the Olmec too. Its massive roots sprawl like giant fingers across the ground. A lizard flicks its tail and vanishes. Somewhere nearby, a monkey howls, probably making fun of your damp socks. Imagine a village waking up here 3,000 years ago, the sun rising over the misty hills, smoke curling from cooking fires, children laughing and getting mud on absolutely everything, dogs barking, a priest walking slowly to the edge of the river with a small figurine in his hands, ready to offer it to the water spirits. The Olmec were spiritual people, even if we can't read exactly what they believed. But their art tells us plenty. Serpent motifs, water creatures, infant faces with feline features, masks with wide, down-turned mouths. It's like looking into someone's dreams and trying to piece together a religion from their sleep-talking. You reach the edge of a shallow canal, likely once part of an irrigation system or a ceremonial moat. The water is still, full of leaves and the occasional darting fish. Across the water, a small mound rises, a platform for a house, or maybe something more official. Maybe a small shrine where offerings were made before planting season, asking the gods to keep the rains regular and the corn disease-free. And here's a fun, weird detail. The Olmec kept crocodiles around. Not as pets, exactly, but crocodiles show up in their iconography, sometimes stylized as water dragons or cosmic monsters. And given that you're standing in croc territory, it's safe to say the Olmec had to learn how to coexist, which probably meant a lot of wary glances, loud clapping noises near riverbanks, and the occasional, "Hey, where did Uncle Clayton go?" Still, they honored these creatures. In some interpretations, the Olmec earth monster is a crocodilian being mouth, wide open, fangs visible, representing the underworld or the gateway to other realms. Lovely bedtime material. You walk on. A breeze stirs the leaves overhead, briefly cool, then gone again. There's a rhythm to this place, a slow, steady pulse. It's not a city of grandeur. It's a city of rituals, of small moments, of carved figurines placed carefully beneath floors, of footprints left in clay courtyards, now long erased. You approach a spot where archaeologists found rows of baby-faced figurines buried with deliberate care. Some wore elaborate headdresses, others were broken before burial. Scholars still debate their meaning fertility offerings, depictions of deities, forgotten family shrines. Nobody knows. But the figurines had a style round faces, almond eyes, slightly pouty mouths, like ancient emojis with secrets. And then there's the sound again, frog song, steady and hypnotic. You pause, letting the moment wash over you. The Olmec lived in rhythm with this swampy land. They built with clay, prayed to rain gods, and probably spent more time than they wanted cleaning mud off their kids. But they thrived. They created cities without metal tools. They carved giant heads without wheels or beasts of burden. And they did it all with quiet persistence. There's no Olmec Rosetta Stone, no royal decree etched in gold. But here, among the frogs and the ferns, the past lingers, in the layout of old homes, in the curve of a forgotten canal, in the way your feet sink ever so slightly into the same mud that once held 1,000 bare souls. You walk on, deeper into the land of vanished people who never really left. The stone heads may be the headline, but this slow, muddy daily life is where the story truly began. You brush a low-hanging branch aside as you step out from the village remains, leaving behind the metates, canals, and friendly swamp frogs to continue your slow walk deeper into the heart of a forgotten civilization. The air thickens just slightly, as if even the humidity knows we're entering important territory now. This isn't just a story about one city or one tribe. You're walking into the threshold of what many consider the first true civilization of Mesoamerica. The blueprint. The prequel to the prequels. The Olmec didn't just exist. They invented the stage. Not everyone agrees on that, of course. Historians still argue whether the Olmec were the mother culture of Mesoamerica, or simply one of many influential players. But one thing's certain. A lot of what became classic Mesoamerican culture pyramids, ball courts, calendar systems, maze gods with complex emotional lives, all shows up here. First, among the mud and mist of the Olmec world. You arrive now at a ceremonial plaza. It doesn't announce itself with grandeur. It's not framed in marble or flanked by towering statues. But as you stand in its center, the space feels arranged, intentional. The mound ahead, now a mossy hill, once supported a platform. Beyond it, a line of what used to be steely upright stones, likely carved with faces, dates, or animals, though most have crumbled or vanished. You close your eyes for a second. Picture the space alive. Men and women gathered under the heavy sky. A priest steps forward, painted in black and red, a bundle of incense in one hand, and a carved obsidian blade in the other. Drums beat in the background. Children fidget. Somewhere, someone spills their drink. The Olmec built cities. That much is clear. And not just haphazard villages, but urban centers with public spaces, elite homes, ceremonial complexes, and possibly even administrative zones. We're talking big names like San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tres Zapotes cities that flourished long before the Maya or Aztecs ever laid their first foundation stone. San Lorenzo, the oldest major Olmec city, rose around 1200 BCE. It had a population in the thousands, maybe even tens of thousands at its peak. They built causeways, artificial terraces, and a water drainage system that still impresses archaeologists. And they did it all without metal tools, wheels, or draft animals, just muscle, fire, and determination. You walk along a raised platform, its edges softened by time. This could have been a residence for the elite, or maybe a staging ground for rituals. Hard to tell now, but the view is good overlooking a low plain, perfect for watching the stars rise, or spotting rival city-states creeping too close for comfort. It's easy to forget how old all of this is. The Olmec were building cities while the Hebrew Bible was still in its early chapters, before Confucius was born, before iron tools came to Mesoamerica. These people shaped earth and stone with patience, then shaped culture with style. And speaking of style, Olmec art is something else. You pass a small stone sculpture, half buried in the grass. It's a curled-up figure, chunky-limbed, with that classic baby face the Olmec loved. Pouty lips, slanted almond eyes, a look that says, "Yes, I'm sacred, and a little bit over it." These sculptures weren't decorative. They were charged, religious, symbolic, and likely part of complex rituals we're still trying to decode. But what set the Olmec apart, what makes them foundational, is that they weren't just inventing things for themselves. They were setting templates. Take the ball game. We'll visit a court later, but know this. The Olmec were among the first to formalize the sacred rubber ball game that would echo through Maya and Aztec societies for centuries. It wasn't just sport. It was cosmology in motion. Win or lose, you were reenacting the struggle between gods and darkness. No pressure, or pyramids. Before the stepped pyramids of Teotihuacan or Chichen Itza, the Olmec were raising massive earthen pyramids. Sure, they didn't have the slick limestone finish, but they had form, alignment, and meaning. These weren't just giant piles of dirt. They were cosmic mountains links between earth, sky, and underworld. Even calendar and numeral systems may have gotten their start here. Evidence is limited, frustratingly so, but certain carved symbols suggest the Olmec were thinking in cycles and quantities, not quite full-blown calendars like the Maya would master later, but enough to say, okay, we're going to need some way to keep track of planting season, and also when to throw a good eclipse party. You crouch beside another stone slab, worn smooth. A glyph? A date? Maybe just a flattened rock. This is the joy and the headache of Olmec archaeology. You never quite know what you're looking at. So much of their material culture has eroded or was made of perishable material. No grand inscriptions, no monumental texts, just symbols and shapes and deeply expressive sculptures that suggest complexity and then vanish into the dirt before explaining themselves. Still, the influence remains. Later civilizations copied them, built on them, borrowed and reinterpreted them. The jaguar cults, the masked priests, the maze gods and mountain temples, all began quietly, swampily, with the Olmec. You step back onto the main trail. Fireflies blink in the gathering twilight. The ground is uneven, but your pace slows with purpose now. You're not just walking through forgotten ruins. You're walking through the birth of a cultural universe. And even if the Olmec didn't write the final symphony, they composed the first haunting notes. They may not have left a note, but they built the staff and taught everyone else how to hum. The trail winds downward now, sloping gently through a corridor of dense palms and gnarled fig roots that spill over the path like lazy vines with somewhere better to be. The air is thicker here, the light dimmer, just enough to make the shadows seem a little extra shadowy. And then, just ahead, something unmistakable comes into view. Another colossal head. You've seen a few by now, but this one still takes your breath a little, not because it's particularly more detailed or expressive, but because of what it represents. It's one thing to read about 40-ton stone sculptures. It's another to stand beneath one, to feel it tower over you like a guardian, or maybe just a very judgmental uncle. This one's headgear is intricately carved, with symmetrical lines across the helmet-like top, ear flaps on the sides, and a soft curve that suggests a protective function. The face itself is heavy-browed, nose broad and flat, lips thick and slightly downturned. It's neither smiling nor frowning, just calmly existing, as if saying, yes, I've seen everything. And no, I will not explain any of it. Let's talk about these Olmec heads for a moment, because they are, quite literally, the big mystery. They were carved from basalt, a volcanic rock not exactly known for its lightness, the nearest known basalt source, about 50 miles from some of the head's final resting places, especially those at San Lorenzo, where many of the earliest were discovered. 50 miles might not sound like much if you're picturing a nice drive in an air-conditioned car, but try dragging a 20-ton rock through swampy jungle terrain, without wheels, cranes, or helpful llamas. Historians still argue how they did it. One theory is that the basalt was rafted along rivers during the rainy season, tied to logs, floated gently downstream, and then dragged the final leg across wooden rollers. Another theory? Teams of laborers using sheer grit and a lot of shouting. But how long did each take? Weeks? Months? Were there sculptor guilds? Apprentice stoneworkers with sore backs and good gossip? We don't know. The Olmec didn't leave records, just the heads. 17 have been found so far, each one unique. They range from about 4.5 to over 11 feet tall, with weights topping out at over 40 tons. To carve a head that size with stone tools, yes, stone tools required immense skill, time, and apparently a total disinterest in ergonomics. And still, they did it. The helmets depicted are one of the most intriguing aspects. Some believe they represent ball players, tying the heads to the sacred Mesoamerican ball game, a brutal, sweaty contest we'll talk about in more detail later. Others argue the heads depict rulers, kings, or chieftains, immortalized in stone. There's even speculation that they were part of a dynastic display, placed in strategic locations as a way to remind people who's in charge. Basically, ancient billboards that said, "Respect your ancestors, or else." You circle the head, noting its wear and tear. Erosion has softened the features, but not erased them. The cheekbones remain strong, the lips expressive. You notice what looks like a chip on the chin battle damage, or just time's slow nibble. Hard to say. And here's a quirky detail. Some of the heads were recarved from earlier monuments. Archaeologists have found that a few were originally thrones. Yes, stone thrones that were later reshaped into heads, which raises a fun chicken or egg question. Did the ruler outgrow his throne and demand a better tribute? Or did someone decide, we're out of basalt, let's just recycle Grandpa's seat? You sit nearby, in the grass. Not on the throne, of course. You're not that bold. You let your mind wander. How many people stood in front of this stone face before you? Priests performing rituals, traders stopping to pay respect before entering the city, children daring each other to poke the nose. It's hard not to feel watched. Not in a spooky way, more like being observed by someone who isn't impressed by your mosquito bites and doesn't care what your smartwatch says. The head has seen rainstorms, jungle regrowth, maybe even small earthquakes. It hasn't flinched, and it's not alone. In many sites, the heads were discovered grouped near ceremonial centers, often buried or face down. Some were placed in rows, others scattered. There's no clear pattern, no manual explaining the arrangement. But the work was deliberate. These weren't discarded stones. They were revered. You rise and start walking again. The jungle opens to another clearing, and wouldn't you know it, another head. This one's smaller, perched on a low mound like it's watching over something important. Maybe it once flanked an entrance, or marked the path to a royal compound. You run your fingers along the carved lines of the helmet, cool to the touch, firm, unmoved by centuries of weather. It's easy to get philosophical out here. The stillness, the age of it all, the effort it took just to make a rock look like someone. It makes your to-do list feel a little less urgent. You imagine the sculptors again, not just laborers, but artists, capable of turning a volcanic boulder into a face that still communicates across millennia. They worked without writing, without metal, without knowing you'd be here someday, running your hand across their masterpiece, like you're saying hello. No note, no plaque, just a face. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the Olmec didn't need to say anything out loud. Maybe they figured if they carved their kings or gods or heroes into stone and set them upright in the earth, the message would be clear enough. We were here. We mattered. And head by head you begin to understand. The path bends again, curling away from the last stone head like a whispered goodbye. You move slowly now, your legs heavy with the kind of pleasant fatigue that only comes from walking ancient ground for hours. The frogs are still going, the insects still harmonizing, and overhead, a few birds call out to each other in long, lazy loops. Nature's bedtime playlist, brought to you by 3,000 years of uninterrupted jungle programming. You catch sight of a flat, sunken space ahead, its edges raised and marked by low embankments. You pause, eyes narrowing. It doesn't look like much at first, just a cleared rectangle, but there's something about its shape, long, narrow, and symmetrical, that feels intentional. Welcome to the ball court. This is where things get weirdly athletic and deeply symbolic, because in the world of the Olmec and every major Mesoamerican civilization that followed, the ball game wasn't just a casual pastime. It was a ritual, a performance, and depending on who you ask, maybe even a cosmic reenactment of life, death, and celestial mechanics. You sit down on one of the sloped sides of the court. It's quiet now, overgrown. The lines faded, the walls partially collapsed. But you can imagine it. Players on either side, pounding rubber balls with their hips, thighs, and elbows, because hands were not allowed. No easy volleys here. Just grit, bruises, and presumably a lot of awkward limping afterward. The Olmec didn't invent rubber. Nature did that, but they figured out how to process latex from rubber trees, using juice from morning glory vines, creating balls with the perfect bounce. That's chemistry and sports science, long before ESPN or lab coats. Historians still argue whether the Olmec version of the ball game was more ceremonial or competitive. Did they keep score? Was it winner takes all? Were the players commoners, nobles, or specially trained athletes blessed by the gods of bounce? You imagine the crowd family, priests, maybe a local ruler with his arms crossed, watching the game like a coach evaluating talent. There's cheering, or chanting, or both. And in the center of it all, a ball moving like a comet, crashing into walls, rebounding at impossible angles. The game was symbolic. It mirrored the movements of heavenly bodies. Some scholars think the court itself represented a cosmic portal, a space between worlds, where the forces of order and chaos wrestled it out in leather and sweat. And it wasn't just the Olmec who saw it that way. The Maya, centuries later, took the symbolism further, tying the game directly to their mythology, where twin heroes descend into the underworld to face death itself on the ball court. Spoiler alert, they win, but not without some very weird interdimensional drama. Still, even if the Olmec version didn't include underworld travel or heroic twins, it was meaningful. Games may have marked harvest cycles, honored gods, or settled disputes. And perhaps, yes, there were human sacrifices afterward, not always, and not necessarily the losing team, but enough that the ball game's final whistle probably made everyone slightly nervous. You walk the edge of the court now, letting your fingers trail the old stone. There's lichen growing here, soft and pale green. Somewhere, a cricket chirps. The jungle seems to hush as you stand in the center of the court, imagining yourself as the ball batted back and forth by divine forces. Left, right, life, death. order, chaos. And then there's the sound, or at least, the imagined one. The deep thud of a rubber ball hitting hard-packed earth. The rhythmic slap of flesh against stone. The short, sharp grunts of effort. The breath of spectators holding back gasps as the ball sails high. These courts weren't just places for games. They were theaters, and everyone had a role to play. One fringe theory, just fringe enough to be fun, suggests that the ball game was used to predict solar cycles. That the bounce patterns, game timing, and court alignments all hinted at a kind of calendrical function. Maybe the ball didn't just move at measured time, like a sacred, sweaty sundial. There's no scoreboard, no trophy, no halftime show. But for the Olmec, that wasn't the point. The ritual mattered more than the result. Every game may have been a small prayer to the universe. Keep spinning. Keep growing corn. Keep the rains gentle this year. You wander to the far end of the court, where a carved stone ring might have once stood, an opening the ball was supposed to pass through. In later versions of the game, these rings were placed impossibly high. You squint upward. There's nothing there now, but vines. But the challenge still echoes. Hit the mark. Please the gods. Or at least try not to embarrass yourself. You sit again on the slope, the stone warm beneath you. Maybe it was once a viewing bench, or a place where players waited their turn. You close your eyes and imagine the ceremony before the match ritual incense, masked dancers, priests in feathered capes. And then, the silence before the ball is served. Bounce. Thud. A game that wasn't just a game. In a world without written rulebooks, without ESPN analysts or halftime pep talks, the Olmec carved a sacred space from Earth and gave it meaning. Their ball courts were arenas of myth, mirrors of the cosmos, and gathering places for communities who needed something to believe in, or shout at, or simply watch together. And now, it's your court, just for tonight. You and the ghosts of the players, still chasing the ball through time. The air feels cooler now as you rise from the edge of the ball court, stretching limbs that were starting to agree with gravity a little too much. The game is over, if it ever began, and you follow a winding trail deeper into the jungle's soft embrace. Leaves brush your arms. A bird calls once and goes silent. Somewhere in the distance, water drips rhythmically from an unseen branch, like the jungle itself is keeping time. Soon, you arrive at a clearing scattered with curious object stones, shaped like axes, polished green figurines, and small, jaguar-faced masks, peeking out from under ferns. It's a strange little garden of symbols, like someone left their dream diary, lying open for you to wander through. Welcome to the spiritual side of the Olmec. You kneel beside one of the green stones jade, or more precisely, jadeite, pulled from distant quarries in what's now Guatemala. This wasn't easy material to find, much less carve. But the Olmec loved it, worshipped it, buried it, gave it personalities. If rocks had social calendars, jade would be the guest of honor at every ritual. And why jade? Historians still argue, naturally. Some think it symbolized life force, water, or vegetation. Others see it as representing power and prestige, something only elites could afford. It's probably both. For the Olmec, things didn't have to choose between meanings. The physical and spiritual worlds overlapped, like a Venn diagram of mystery. Nearby, half buried in soil, you find a small sculpture, a figure with the round face of an infant, but wide feline eyes, and a prominent upper lip. It's one of the most recognizable Olmec motifs, the so-called word jaguar, Part baby, part jaguar, well, we're not entirely sure. Some scholars think it represents a deity, possibly connected to rain, fertility, or lightning. Others believe it's the visual result of mythological shape-shifting, where humans merged with powerful jungle animals. A more grounded theory. It could symbolize elite lineage, a way to claim supernatural ancestry, perhaps by suggesting that Grandma once had a brief romantic entanglement with a jaguar spirit. Hey, families are complicated. The Olmec were absolutely fascinated by jaguars. They appear in carvings, figurines, and even on ceremonial axes, not as pets. Obviously, jaguars are not particularly snuggly, but as symbols of strength, stealth, and spiritual potency. In a place where thick jungle was both home and hazard, the jaguar became a kind of divine ambassador between the world of people and the shadowy realm of gods. You pick up one of the figurines, smooth, cool, with almond-shaped eyes, and that now familiar down-turned mouth. It looks serene, or bored, maybe both. There's something oddly calming about Olmec faces. They never look shocked or angry, just aware, like they've already seen the ending and decided it's not worth stressing over. All around you, there are traces of ritual offerings. Archaeologists have found caches like these buried beneath buildings, plazas, and even ball courts. Jade, serpentine, iron or mirrors, polished stone axes carefully arranged, sometimes broken intentionally, always purposeful. The ground beneath Olmec cities was a hidden gallery of gifts to the gods. You wonder what prompted a typical offering. Was it seasonal tied to planting or harvest? A plea for rain? A thank you for surviving another stormy month without a crocodile incident? Or maybe it was more personal. A birth, a death, a dream someone couldn't shake until they gave it back to the earth. And yes, mirrors. That's not a metaphor. The Olmec made them out of iron ore and magnetite polished to a sheen, round or square, sometimes worn on the chest like a badge. They probably didn't use them for checking their hair, though if they did, it would have been for spiritual grooming. Mirrors in Mesoamerican culture were portals, tools for divination, a way to look not just at yourself, but through yourself, into the other world. You can almost imagine an Olmec priest peering into a dark, perfectly smooth disk of magnetite, trying to interpret a god's frown, or maybe their very long silence. The forest quiets further as you make your way to a small rise in the earth. Atop it, once stood a shrine. The evidence is faint now, a few post holes, scattered fragments of incense burners, but the feeling is there. A hush, even among the trees, like you've walked into a room where someone just finished praying. You kneel for a moment, not out of obligation, just respect. Not everything here makes sense, but that's okay. The Olmec weren't building for clarity, they were building for mystery, and that's what's lasted. Every stone, every figurine, every snarl-faced mask was a message to the gods, to the earth, maybe to us. A whispered suggestion that reality had more layers than could ever be carved in basalt. You pass one last offering cache, half exposed by a fallen tree. Jade beads, lined up neatly. No tomb, no bones, just beads in a pattern, untouched for centuries. What do they mean? No one knows. And that's kind of beautiful. The jungle is softer here, quieter, somehow, as if it too is leaning in, curious about what you'll discover next. You step over a root, duck under a branch, and find yourself entering a small grove littered with fragments of sculpture. Broken pieces of carved stone lie scattered in the undergrowth. A foot, a hand, A face with a furrowed brow and feline eyes. It's the same type of face you've seen again and again, carved into jade, molded in clay, etched into stone. The were-jaguar baby. You pause in front of the best preserved example yet, a small, nearly intact statue, sitting atop a rock, like it chose that spot itself. It has the chubby limbs of an infant, the almond eyes of the Olmec style, and that signature open mouth, downturned, wide, bordered by fangs, part child, part jaguar, part adorable, part deeply unsettling. You're not alone in your confusion. Historians still argue over what, exactly, this odd little hybrid meant to the Olmec. Some see it as a god, others as a mythic ancestor, still others as an icon of shamanic transformation, a visual shorthand for the belief that powerful individuals could spiritually morph into jungle animals. The jaguar, as you've gathered, was a big deal in Olmec cosmology. It ruled the night. It swam rivers, climbed trees, and stalked the underbrush like a shadow made of muscle, powerful, mysterious, and very much not to be messed with. So of course, any self-respecting shaman would want to channel a little jaguar energy when performing rituals or settling disputes. You pick up a shard of another figurine, just a leg, bent at the knee. Smooth, greenish stone, probably serpentine. You run your thumb along its curve and wonder if it was once part of a matching pair, a twin, a mythological duo. Here's the thing. Many were jaguar figures show strikingly similar features. Some cradle objects in their arms. Some look upward, mouths open in mid-cry. Others kneel, frozen mid-transformation. These aren't generic doodles. They're deliberate, recurring, and weirdly consistent across hundreds of miles. What's stranger still is how often these figures appear in burial contexts, hidden beneath platforms, buried with offerings, stashed beneath the floors of elite residences. It's as if the Olmec wanted to keep these beings close, even in death, or maybe especially in death. Some scholars have gone further, suggesting that the were-jaguar was part of a foundational origin myth. One theory posits that the Olmec believed their ancestors were born from a union between a jaguar and a human woman. Don't think about it too hard. And that the resulting offspring were sacred. Not half-animal freaks, but powerful hybrids, blessed with the strength of the beast and the reason of man. You sit on a fallen log and take in the scene. Jungle vines wrap around stone fragments like fingers unwilling to let go. Moss has started to creep across the jaguar baby's face, giving it an accidental mustache. The moment is oddly tender. You're sitting in a shrine to ambiguity, a place where the lines between human and animal, dream and waken, real and imagined, blur into something beautifully indecipherable. And not just indecipherable, universal. Cultures across the ancient world had shapeshifters, bear men, wolf women, bird spirits. The Olmec were no different in that sense. But what makes them unique is how central that identity seems to have been. It wasn't a fringe idea. It was front and center, carved into monuments, buried with offerings, smiling well, sort of, through the stone for generations to come. One particularly mysterious statue found at a major Olmec site shows a human figure holding what appears to be a limp, were-jaguar baby. The adult looks down, stern and composed. The infant is lifeless, or sleeping, or maybe in mid-transformation. It's not violent, but it's unsettling like a myth you've caught in mid-sentence. Was it a god-parent and divine child? A sacrifice? A scene from a story no one wrote down? You lean forward, elbows on knees. The more you look at the baby face in front of you, the more expressive it becomes. A hint of a smile, a yawn, or maybe it's just the play of shadow across stone. Either way, it's watching you now, and you can't help but feel it knows something. And maybe that's the point. The Olmec didn't leave you a written explanation. They left faces, symbols, creatures that cross categories. And maybe the were-jaguar is just a metaphor, a symbol, for those moments when you don't fit cleanly into one thing or another. Not man, not beast, not here, not gone, just becoming. You rise again, feeling the pull of the trail beyond the grove. The baby stays behind, still lounging on its stone like it has nowhere better to be. And you? You walk away, but part of you lingers. After all, who hasn't felt a little like a were-jaguar baby sometimes? Too small for your world, too strange for the rules, and just possibly a little bit sacred. The jungle path narrows now, flanked by towering ceiba trees whose roots bulge and twist, like sleeping giants under blankets of moss. The air tastes slightly metallic, as if the earth itself is breathing with you. And then you spot something odd at first glance. Just another hill in a land full of hills. But as you get closer, the hill takes on a suspiciously geometric shape. It's a pyramid. Not the kind you might expect. No sleek limestone sides or sharp angles rising toward the heavens. This one's built of earth, layered over centuries, rising in stepped levels that have long since softened and slouched. But once upon a time, this would have dominated the horizon. It was the centerpiece of La Venta, the second great Olmec city after San Lorenzo. You climb slowly, your feet finding purchase in the dirt and vines. The steps are worn some barely there, but your pace is steady. You're not in a rush. The view can wait. Every step is a conversation with the past. La Venta rose to prominence around 900 BCE, after San Lorenzo mysteriously declined, possibly due to environmental changes, shifting river paths, or, depending on which historian you ask, a particularly enthusiastic enemy raid. Whatever the cause, the Olmec moved their capital eastward to this new, more coastal site. And what a sight. La Venta wasn't just a city. It was a sacred landscape, carefully arranged with pyramids, plazas, platforms, and most notably, a massive ceremonial complex that pointed with uncanny precision to astronomical phenomena. Some scholars suggest it was aligned with the rising of certain stars or solstice sunrises. Others think the alignment marked sacred routes, rivers, or even migration paths. You pause halfway up the pyramid, catching your breath. Below, the jungle stretches endlessly, a sea of green. The faint call of a toucan echoes in the distance, and as you glance down, you catch a shimmer in the dirt, a glint of mica. That's right, mica. La Venta is famous for one of the strangest, most delightful archaeological features in Mesoamerica. A buried mosaic floor made entirely of polished serpentine blocks, arranged into a precise rectangular pattern. It was never meant to be seen. The Olmec built it, admired it, and then deliberately buried it under layers of earth, like a secret for the gods, or maybe for no one at all. You imagine the process, workers carefully setting the green tiles, adjusting each one for alignment, maybe stepping back to admire the shimmering result, and then, slowly, solemnly, covering it all with soil. Historians still argue about the meaning. Was it symbolic? A cosmic map? A royal tomb covering? Or just a really expensive offering to impress divine visitors? The fact that it wasn't meant to be visible suggests a deep belief in the unseen, a sacred aesthetic that didn't rely on audience applause. You reach the top of the pyramid at last. The view is humbling. The canopy stretches forever. Below, the ancient city once bustled with priests, traders, artisans, and ball players. Now, only fragments remain platform outlines, the faint track of a ceremonial causeway, a stone altar peeking through the brush. And yet, you feel it, that buzz in your chest, the sense that this place meant something. It was a center, a point of origin. Down below, archaeologists discovered something else curious, a series of burial offerings, including rows of jade figurines standing in careful formation. They face a large flat stone, no inscriptions, just arrangement. Some stand erect, some kneel. All of them seem to be looking. But at what? Perhaps they're mid-ceremony, or recreating a myth, or waiting for something to rise behind that blank stone like the sun, or a god, or a memory. You sit at the edge of the pyramid and let your thoughts drift. It's said that La Venta's central mound, the very one you're perched on, might have been the first pyramid in Mesoamerica. If so, it predates all the better-known pyramids by centuries, and though it lacks glamour, it has gravitas. Here's another twist beneath this pyramid. Researchers have found evidence of intentionally interred offerings. Axes, figurines, even clusters of baby-faced heads carved from jade. The Olmec, it seems, were masters of the symbolic burial. They built into the ground, not just above it. They honored the earth as much as the sky. You brush a layer of dirt from the stone beside you. A carved glyph. Just a chip? Hard to say. But you wonder, did someone sit here once, 3,000 years ago, looking out over a city they helped build? Did they whisper to the gods, or to themselves? Maybe they had questions. Maybe they were tired. Maybe they felt that same feeling you feel now, small, but connected. Alone, but not lonely. The Olmec didn't build La Venta to be eternal. Earth structures crumble, but they built it with purpose. Every mound, every axis, every buried offering tells a story, even if we can't fully read it. And maybe that's enough. You begin the slow descent, feet careful on the uneven earth. At the base, a cluster of stones hints at a former temple. Gone now, but not forgotten. Your foot brushes a piece of polished serpentine, cool, green, and just barely shaped. A leftover from the mosaic? Or part of something no one ever finished? You pocket the thought, not the stone, and walk on. The trail levels out again as you leave the pyramid behind, exchanging sacred altitude for the quiet hush of the low jungle. You step carefully now, dodging roots and the occasional too curious insect, and as you round a bend, the landscape opens into another plaza wider than the last. Still, symmetrical, and curiously serene. This is no chaotic sprawl. Everything here was laid out with care. You're standing in the heart of an Olmec city, and for a moment, the quiet buzz of the jungle gives way in your imagination to the soft thrum of activity footsteps on packed earth. Clay pots clinking, children laughing, priests murmuring, and somewhere in the background, the thunk of a rubber ball bouncing off a stone wall. Cities like La Venta, San Lorenzo, and Tres Zapotes weren't just villages that happened to get bigger. They were planned, structured, urban in a way that surprises people who assume the Olmec were all mud huts and jungle trails. The evidence? Clear axes of symmetry, large open plazas for communal events, platforms and mounds aligned with celestial events, roads, yes, elevated causeways connecting key areas, even water systems, engineered with channels and culverts to drain the soggy lowlands. You stand at what might have been a crossroads, though here. It's more a mossy fork in the underbrush. To the left, the remains of residential platforms. To the right, the probable edge of an elite compound. Ahead, the central axis that once led from the pyramid to the ceremonial core. Not bad for a society that didn't write things down. That's one of the greatest Olmec mysteries, actually. The near total absence of written records. Unlike their cultural descendants, the Maya, the Olmec left no known books, codices, or long inscriptions. Just a handful of symbols that might be early writing. Historians still argue about it. Was it a proto-writing system, more symbolic than phonetic, or just a complex artistic style that looked like writing but wasn't? In 2006, a block called the Cascajal Stone surfaced a flat slab with strange symbols carved in rows, possibly the earliest writing in the Americas. But it's one of a kind. No other stones like it. No dictionaries. No instruction manuals. Just this tantalizing hint that the Olmec might have been this close to writing, and maybe lost it. You kneel beside a low platform, probably the base of a long-gone house. Clay bricks once stood here, reinforced with palm and thatch. Inside might have been simple mats, grinding stones, ceramic bowls, and maybe a small altar. The remains of daily life. The stuff of memory. And here's a charming detail. Olmec homes may have included figurines of deities or ancestors, tucked into the walls or buried beneath floors. Not just for show, for protection, for presence. You're literally walking over a neighborhood of quiet, spiritual roommates. Further along the plaza, you spot a worn altar, stone-carved, heavy, and low to the ground. It might have once held a burning brazier, or supported an offering bowl, or, depending on how dramatic you're feeling, a sacrificed jaguar cub wrapped in ceremonial cloth. Don't worry, no signs of distress, just fur and mystery. These altars often depicted scenes, humans emerging from caves, interacting with jaguar-faced figures, or seated in strange recessed thrones. It's theatrical, but deliberate. Myth and memory carved into public space. The Olmec weren't afraid to theatricalize belief, and in their cities, sacred and secular coexisted at every step. You can imagine a priest here, seated cross-legged, wearing an obsidian mirror on his chest, waving a bundle of burning copal resin, a smoky incense that smelled like pine and dreams. He mutters prayers, while the townsfolk gather nearby, faces solemn, eyes a little watery from the smoke. One oddity stands out as you continue wandering buried children. Yes, multiple sites have turned up the remains of children interred beneath platforms and plazas, often with grave goods, jade beads, figurines, ceremonial axes. Some seem to have been placed intentionally, their bodies positioned with care. Was it a form of ancestor veneration, a tragic accident honored with ritual, or something darker? Historians still debate. Some point to signs of high mortality in early cities disease, malnutrition, even war. Others suggest a symbolic sacrifice linked to fertility or cosmology. Either way, the presence of these tiny graves adds a haunting note to the Olmec cityscape. For the Olmec, the line between home and holy was thin. As you walk past the edge of the plaza, your foot kicks a ceramic shard. Just a fragment of a bowl, reddish-orange, decorated with faint incisions. Pottery was everywhere in Olmec cities, used for food, drink, storage, and possibly even for ritual feasting. You imagine sitting on a reed mat under a palm roof, eating maize porridge out of that very bowl, flavored with chili and cacao. Not bad. Probably room temperature. But hey, Olmec cuisine had its charms. Before you leave, you take one last look across the open plaza, now silent. But once, it pulsed with life. Vendors calling out fruit prices, children chasing dogs, priests whispering prayers, elders squinting at the stars. Cities are more than buildings. Their emotions laid out in street grids, and the Olmec knew this long before cities had names. You step forward again. The sky above begins to soften the sunlight now. More of that bluish twilight hue that wraps around everything like a calm exhale. You're deep into the Olmec world now. Your boots marked with dust from plazas and pyramid mounds. Your senses tuned to the rhythm of a place that once sang with ceremony, and now you approach one of its quieter, more tender mysteries. You come upon what looks like a modest stone enclosure, low walls, half sunk into the ground. Not a temple, not a court. Something simpler, something personal. You're standing in what archaeologists believe was part of a household compound. And today, we're going to talk about the Olmec daily life. The stuff that didn't get carved into altars or buried beneath pyramids, but instead happened between yawns, errands, and breakfast. You step inside the low wall. The floor was likely packed earth, maybe covered in woven mats. A small hearth sits at the center, just a ring of stone now, but once the site of boiling maize, roasting squash, and morning cups of thick, unsweetened chocolate. The Olmec, like many Mesoamerican peoples, cultivated maize as a staple crop. Alongside it came beans, squash, chili peppers, and tropical fruits like avocado and papaya. It wasn't a bland diet. If anything, it was colorful, seasonal, and surprisingly spicy. You crouch next to a large, flat stone, a metate, used for grinding corn. Beside it, a rounded handstone, a mano fits neatly into your grip. You give it a gentle push across the metate's surface, just enough to hear that familiar scrape. Generations of women, grandmothers and daughters and young brides, probably did the same, morning after morning, preparing masa for tortillas or tamales. And it wasn't all cooking and grinding. The Olmec produced textiles, too likely from cotton and plant fibers. We've never found a full Olmec shirt, of course, but traces in tools and figurines suggest they knew how to spin, weave, and even dye. The wealthy may have worn brightly colored garments. Commoners probably had more practical fashion, something breezy, suitable for ball games or escaping the occasional jaguar. Outside the house, you find what's believed to be a garden plot, just a dip in the land now, but it once would have been vibrant with herbs and vegetables. The Olmec practiced raised field agriculture, adjusting the swampy terrain to suit their crops. They knew how to compost, rotate, and fertilize. Some fields even included floating gardens, the precursors to the Aztecs' more famous chanampas. And pets? Likely yes. Dogs, for sure, early Mesoamerican breeds that doubled as companions, guards, and, in some regions, protein. Let's hope the Olmec leaned more toward the cuddly side. You walk beyond the household space now and enter a wider cluster of structures. This was probably a neighborhood, maybe for middle-class artisans. That's right. The Olmec weren't all rulers and peasants. Evidence suggests they had social stratification elites, priests, skilled workers, and common laborers, all living within the same city, but with different homes, tools, and privileges. In one corner, you find fragments of obsidian blades and chert tools, suggesting a craftsman once worked here. Maybe a carver of figurines. Maybe a mask maker. Maybe just a guy who was really good at turning rock into sharp things and charged fair prices for it. And let's not forget ritual life at home. Many Olmec houses had altars, or buried offerings, or figurines with what can only be described as spiritually intense eyebrows. Religion wasn't limited to the big pyramids. It was woven into the floorboards, the hearth, the bedtime stories. Every part of daily life had a toe dipped in the sacred. You pause next to a figurine fragment, just a torso broad, arms out, chipped at the waist. It once stood on a family altar, maybe placed there after a dream, or a birth, or a lucky planting. Maybe it represented a deity, or a grandmother, or some protective spirit you're supposed to greet every morning so your soup doesn't burn. The Olmec world was communal, too. Houses weren't isolated. They clustered around shared courtyards, with fire pits, shade trees, and places to sit and gossip. Children played, neighbors shared food, news traveled fast, especially if someone's pig wandered off again. Okay, not pigs, but maybe a chicken-like bird. Same vibe. There's even evidence of markets' open-air spaces where traders bartered maize, obsidian, cacao, feathers, and possibly gossip. Trade was vital to Olmec society. Items like jade and obsidian had to come from afar, and shell beads from coastal regions suggest they had far-reaching trade routes, well beyond their immediate neighbors. You reach the edge of the neighborhood, where a low wall separates homes from the ceremonial zone, and you realize the sacred and the mundane weren't separated by miles, just a few steps. A priest might walk past your house on his way to the pyramid, and your mom might wave him down to ask if it's okay to plant squash before the next full moon. The Olmec didn't build fences around the divine. They folded it into the workday. As the jungle darkens, you sit near the hearth of that ancient home, imagining the glow of firelight, a bowl of stew, a child asleep on a woven mat, a grandmother humming something tuneless but soothing, and outside, always the forest, watching, listening. Life wasn't easy, but it was full, grounded, and in its way, beautiful. The firelight you imagined flickers behind you now, a memory of warmth in the deepening hush of the jungle. You rise, brushing imaginary ash from your palms, and follow a narrow path that winds toward the outskirts of the old city. The trees are closer together here. The air is heavier, like a sigh waiting to be released. This is where we find the edge of the Olmec world, and start asking what happened when things began to unravel. The Olmec weren't wiped out overnight. There was no single cataclysm, no comet or conquest carved neatly into the record. Instead, their civilization began to fade, slowly, like candlelight slipping down into its final flicker. By around 400 BCE, major sites like La Venta were abandoned. The pyramids, the plazas, the sacred ball courts left to the vines, and the silence. And the question we're left with, one whispered by every overgrown stairway and eroded head, is why? Historians still argue about the cause, of course. That's half the fun. One popular theory: environmental change. Rivers, the lifeblood of Olmec cities, may have shifted course due to flooding, sediment buildup, or climate shifts. With water sources disrupted, agriculture would have suffered. Trade routes would have bent away, crops withered, cities emptied. Another theory suggests internal unrest, a breakdown in elite power. Maybe the ball games lost their magic. Maybe the gods stopped responding. Maybe the people stopped listening. Then, there's the outside pressure theory. The Olmec weren't alone in the region. As other rising cultures gained strength like the Zapotecs in the Oaxaca Valley, or emerging groups in the highlands, they may have challenged Olmec trade, or even pushed into their territories. And here's a wild card. Some archaeologists argue that the Olmec didn't truly disappear at all, that they migrated, reshaping themselves into newer cultures, that their bloodlines, languages, and spiritual codes didn't vanish, but blended, flowed, and evolved into the civilizations that came after. The Maya, for instance, inherited many Olmec symbols: the jaguar, the ball game, even pyramid architecture. The Teotihuacan builders also drew from early Mesoamerican precedents. It's possible the Olmec weren't destroyed, just rebranded. You crouch by a stream that may once have flowed through a bustling market square. The water is shallow now, trickling over smooth stones, whispering stories no one remembers. You dip your fingers in and feel the cool tug of time. Nearby, fragments of a platform wall peek from the undergrowth. Maybe once it supported a house, or a shrine, or a storehouse full of cacao beans. Now it supports nothing but moss. There's a melancholy here, but not a tragic one. More like a soft farewell. The Olmec didn't burn out. They let go, as if they knew their moment had passed, and that something else was waiting to rise. You imagine the last days of La Venta. Fewer people in the plazas. A priest lighting incense for a ceremony no one attends. Children playing ball, while the elders mutter about the weather. Traders looking westward toward newer markets. The river shifting silently, 1 inch at a time. And someone, maybe a sculptor, finishing one last stone face and laying down their tools. Not because they've failed, but because their chapter is done. You move farther from the city center now, into the transition zone, where urban life gave way to farms, forests, and outposts. Here, you see signs of ongoing habitation, simple homes, agricultural plots, everyday life continuing, even as the sacred core grew quiet. This supports the theory that not all Olmec cities collapsed violently. Some were just left behind, their stones too heavy to carry, their memories folded neatly into oral histories. And still, the symbols remained. Long after La Venta's pyramid crumbled, other cultures kept carving baby-faced gods, kept building ball courts, kept burying jade. The echoes of Olmec cosmology rippled outward like circles in water, soft and persistent. You reach a grove of ceiba trees, tall, majestic, and sacred in Mesoamerican thought. The Olmec probably honored these trees, seeing in them a world axis roots in the underworld, branches in the heavens. Standing beneath them now, you feel very small, but in a good way. One last thought lingers as you watch the shadows shift between trunks. Maybe the Olmec left because they were ready, not to vanish, but to transform, to slip beneath the surface of history like a buried mosaic, waiting to be uncovered again, not as a warning, not as a monument, but as a whisper. We were first, but not last. And that whisper, it's still out here, in the jungle, winding between tree roots, slipping into your dreams. The jungle around you exhales again, long, slow, and steady, almost like it's glad you stayed. You wander now through a quieter part of the site, where stone fragments rise from the dirt, like half-formed thoughts. Here lies the overlooked, the edge pieces of a puzzle long scattered, bits of tools, shards of ceramic, and curious lumps of sculpted basalt that never quite became anything finished. This is where we meet the Olmec artisans and the work of their hands. You stop beside a half-buried stone. It's rough, wide, flat, and once, likely the start of something grand. Maybe a throne, maybe a jaguar, maybe just a really ambitious paperweight. Whatever it was, it didn't make it past the planning phase. That's okay. Even the best artists abandoned drafts. The Olmec were masters of stone carving, especially for a civilization without metal tools. Just imagine all those colossal heads, altars, thrones, shaped with stone tools, wooden levers, and a whole lot of elbow grease. You try lifting a granite pestle without grumbling. Now imagine chiseling a cheekbone from basalt. Historians still argue about the precise process. Some suggest the Olmec used sand and water as abrasives, grinding stone against stone for hours, days, weeks. Others believe they mastered pressure, fracturing, finding natural cracks, and working with them, not against. And it wasn't just the heads. Olmec artisans created figurines, masks, ceremonial blades, and mosaic tiles, many from jade, serpentine, and hematite. These weren't hobby projects. They were cultural currency, spiritual tools, trade goods, tiny prayers made permanent. You pause before a broken Celt's cash-thin, polished axe heads, carefully arranged in a long line, beneath what might have once been a temple. They weren't for chopping wood. These were offerings, symbols of prestige, weapons for the gods. Some were deliberately broken before burial, as if releasing their spirit back to the earth. You reach down and touch one, just the edge, still cool, still smooth. You wonder about the hands that shaped it. Were they calloused, young, patient? One fringe theory, delightfully bold, suggests that some of these stone carvings were early attempts at preserving stories. That a figurine with raised arms, feline features, and embedded jade eyes wasn't just an object, but a narrative, a scene, a moment, a frozen piece of myth. In a world without books, every sculpture was a sentence. Nearby, a fragment of a mask peeks through the soil. It's heavy, stylized, and clearly ceremonial, too bulky to wear for long, too detailed to toss aside. Many Olmec masks share the same features: thick lips, down-turned mouths, slightly flattened noses. It's not realistic. It's symbolic, maybe divine. One mask unearthed at La Venta even had holes for string, as if it had been worn briefly, perhaps during a ritual, perhaps by a priest pretending to be someone or something else. You imagine stepping into that role, putting on the face of a god, even just for a moment, and letting your voice disappear. Some masks had inlays, tiny fragments of shell or iron ore pressed into the eyes. Others were buried face down in altars, or placed alongside jade figurines in dense underground caches. The Olmec didn't fear symbolism. They leaned into it. Every eye had meaning, every curve, a purpose. You sit beside a fallen workbench, a flat stone scarred with shallow grooves. An ancient sculptor might have spent hours here, whittling, polishing, humming a tune only the birds remember. And all around him, the city thrummed. Art wasn't isolated in galleries. It was part of the daily rhythm. Tools and talismans, beauty and belief. The sculptor might have paused to sip cacao, to greet a neighbor, to watch his children run barefoot across a hot plaza. And the biggest marvel? The Olmec managed all of this without wheels, without beasts of burden, without metal tools, just vision, sweat, and unrelenting patience. They even carved basalt monuments transported from quarries dozens of miles away. Historians still puzzle over how. Some say river rafts. Others argue for wooden rollers. Still others suspect divine intervention, or at least a workforce with really good backs. Whatever the method, the effect is the same: awe. because that's what Olmec artisans created, not just objects, but awe. Even now, in fragment and ruin, the pieces command respect. You're not just looking at a rock. You're seeing intent, effort, and a long-forgotten moment of quiet triumph. You trace the edge of a broken carving, just a curve, too weathered to guess what it was. But someone once finished this stroke. Someone believed it mattered. And maybe that's the heart of Olmec artistry. Not perfection, not permanence, just presence. To shape stone in a humid jungle, knowing it might one day be buried, eroded, or misunderstood. And doing it anyway? That's devotion. The jungle breathes around you again, warm and steady, like it's been waiting patiently for you to notice something you've missed. You rise from the carver's bench, stretch your limbs, and step softly into a clearing wrapped in vines and the golden hush of late twilight. And here, you meet the part of the story most people never expect. The Olmec gods didn't get blamed. Most ancient civilizations, when things started going sideways, blamed the divine. Drought, the gods are angry. Flood, the gods need feeding. Invasion, clearly, someone forgot a ritual. But with the Olmec, something strange lingers in the archaeological record. No widespread signs of divine rage. No mass burnings of temples. No panicked burial of religious icons. No obvious signs that the people turned on their gods when the city started to empty out. Instead, what you find are quiet departures, offerings still buried, sites left with care, altars undisturbed. It's like the Olmec didn't believe the gods abandoned them, they just moved on together. You stand before what may have once been a ceremonial platform. The foundation is still visible, squared off with stone. A few figurines weathered and moss-covered lie where they once stood, facing west. You get the feeling this was a place not of fear, but of reverence. A good place to say goodbye. And maybe that's what they did. One theory holds that the Olmec didn't collapse at all, that instead they chose to disperse slowly, intentionally folding their beliefs and customs into the people and places they joined. No need to destroy the old, just adapt it. Carry it in your pockets like jade beads. This could explain why Olmec's symbols jaguars, baby faces, altars, axes show up everywhere in later Mesoamerican civilizations. Maya kings claimed descent from Olmec ancestors. Zapotec priests borrowed iconography. Even the great city of Teotihuacan has echoes of Olmec planning and sacred math. But the reverence didn't just survive in symbols. It may have survived in attitudes, especially that deep sense of harmony between human effort and cosmic rhythm. The Olmec didn't try to conquer the world. They tried to align with it. You pause beside a broken offering cache, half revealed by time. There's a shattered figurine, a fragment of obsidian, 2 jade beads that once gleamed in lamplight. Nothing flashy, just humble, thoughtful pieces. One fringe theory still debated suggests these offerings may have been a kind of contract with the world. Not bribes for favor, but promises. We'll plant, we'll care, we'll honor, and in return, may we eat, may we breathe, may we belong. And when the rains failed or the rivers moved, the contract wasn't torn in anger. It was folded gently, placed under a stone, and carried onward. Another oddity in the archaeological record: few depictions of punishment or apocalypse. No angry deities raining fire, no scenes of cosmic battles. The Olmec religion, so far as we can tell, was focused more on transformation than judgment. That's why you keep seeing hybrid creatures. We're jaguars, birdmen, serpent lords, not as monsters, but as bridges between worlds. To be both human and jaguar wasn't a curse. It was a power, and in a way, that power lived on. Today, in modern Mesoamerican rituals, you still find echoes of Olmec thought, the sacred ceiba tree, the central hearth, the importance of maize, and the belief that every act, from planting to carving, is part of something bigger. You sit at the edge of the platform, your back to the altar stone, and watch the light shift through the trees. No sudden thunderclap, no burst of prophecy, just stillness. The gods, it seems, don't need drama to be heard. The Olmec had a talent for ambiguity. They didn't carve everything out in straight lines. Their gods didn't speak in ultimatums. Their symbols could mean one thing, or another, or both. And perhaps that's what made their culture so resilient, even in absence. They didn't collapse with a scream. They faded like a prayer you say under your breath, one you don't need to finish, because the meaning is already understood. As you rise to leave, you glance back one more time. The altar is quiet. The figurines are still. But something in the air seems to shimmer like, maybe, just maybe, someone heard you anyway, not because you asked, but because you listened. You move slowly now, following a thin path stitched with shadows. The jungle is nearly full dark, and the cicadas have shifted gears into their nighttime rhythmless urgent, more hypnotic. It's as if the whole forest is exhaling, getting ready to sleep. And yet, just ahead, you glimpse something familiar, a shape in the darkness, a familiar tilt of brow and curve of cheek, another colossal head. This one isn't as well preserved. Its face is partially sunken, lips chipped, one ear now the home of a determined little vine. But the expression remains calm, unreadable, maybe a little tired. And as you sit beside it, you wonder for the 100th time, who were these faces meant to be? Historians still debate the identity of the stoneheads. Some argue they're rulers, commemorated in stone, each one wearing a distinct helmet or headdress, possibly linked to real-life regalia. Others say they're ballplayers, immortalized for ritual performance. Still others see them as gods, or symbols of broader concepts like strength, endurance, or the sun. Each head is different, and yet also similar. Broad nose, full lips, a steady, almost amused gaze. If you squint, they look like they might sigh at you for asking too many questions and not drinking enough water. But one thing is certain. The Olmec heads lasted, unlike temples or homes, which crumbled under vines and time. The basalt faces endure. And that's no accident. They were made to outlast even memory. You reach out and place a hand against the cool stone. It's smooth in places, pitted in others. And somewhere under your palm is a fingerprint long ago worn away, but once there. A sculptor paused here, maybe leaned in, maybe smiled, and you wonder how much of this was for the gods and how much was for themselves. Let's not forget, even ancient people liked legacy. They might have been spiritual, yes, but they were also proud, creative, determined. Maybe that sculptor wanted his face to last through floods and vines and bird droppings. Or maybe he just liked the idea that someone, someday, might sit beside it and ask who he was. Well, mission accomplished. You lean back against the head and look up. Between the canopy leaves, the stars begin to appear sharp, unblinking. The same stars the Olmec watched. The same constellations they built pyramids to align with. The same skies they read like a cosmic newspaper. Their understanding of the cosmos may have been more sophisticated than we give credit for. Alignments in La Venta and other sites suggest astronomical planning, the north-south axis of ceremonial centers, the orientation of platforms and causeways. It wasn't just practical, it was philosophical. They believed in a world of layers, the sky above, the earth in the middle, the watery underworld below. Sacred trees and mountains connected these realms. So did caves. So did rituals. And so, maybe, did these stone heads planted firmly in the earth, watching the heavens. You're not the first to be captivated by them. Even the Maya, centuries later, seemed to inherit the Olmec love of stone portraiture. And by then, these heads may already have been ancient ruins, objects of curiosity for a new generation. Imagine being a 9th century Maya farmer and stumbling upon one of these things while planting maize. No context, no explanation, just stone and silence and a face older than your gods. And yet, the essence of the Olmec didn't vanish. You can trace it in Maya jaguar deities, in their complex calendars, in the ball courts, in the very structure of their cities. Even in their language, echoes of Olmec sounds may linger. The Zapotec, too, borrowed architectural styles, shared religious iconography, adopted ritual rhythms. The Olmec are called a mother culture, a foundational layer from which many others grew. But maybe that term is a little too tidy. Maybe they were more like a tide rising, shaping everything, and then receding, leaving patterns in the sand for others to build upon. You rise now, stepping away from the colossal head, and continue along the faint trail. The jungle closes behind you gently, like a curtain. Every step forward is a step into echoes, because that's the gift the Olmec left us, not just stone, but influence, a quiet shaping force. Their legacy isn't a straight line. It's a network of whispers. A pyramid here, a jaguar there, a style of headdress, a mythic motif, a ball game, a way of carving a smile that's just mysterious enough to make you wonder what the sculptor knew and didn't say. You arrive now at the edge of a clearing where no ruins remain, just trees and stars, and the smell of earth after a long, silent rain. And still, the Olmec are here, in the symbols that survived, in the faces that watch, in the questions that linger, in the way you pause, just for a moment, before stepping into the dark. You walk slower now, the forest path fading beneath your feet, as soft moonlight spills across the ground. Each step feels like it lands on memory. There's no hurry. The night is wide, and the past is patient. Ahead, just beyond the ferns, you catch a glimpse of it. The final stone head. It rests alone in a small clearing, half buried, half forgotten, as if waiting for someone who's very late or very early. Either way, it doesn't seem bothered. Its eyes are closed, or maybe they were never open to begin with. You step closer. Sit beside it. This is where the story narrows down to just you and that face. Both of you travelers. Both of you wondering. This head is different. No helmet. No name. Just a smooth brow, full lips, and that expression of faint, eternal amusement. You've seen it in portraits, in dreams, maybe even in mirrors. A look that says, I've seen things, but I'm not telling. And so you sit and breathe. It's said that the Olmec believed in sacred silence, a kind of stillness that allowed the spirit world to speak. Priests might fast for days before a ritual, not just to purify, but to quiet, to become still enough to notice what usually gets drowned out by the noise of living. You listen now, and slowly, things rise to the surface. the sound of leaves brushing against each other, a distant night bird calling once, then again, your own breathing, deep and even, and beneath it all, something quieter still, the knowledge that this place, these people, this entire vanished civilization was never truly gone. Just not here in the way we expect. The Olmec left no scrolls, no diaries, no dramatic farewell carved into temple walls. But they left impressions, stone and story, silence and echo. And if you tilt your head just right and soften your eyes, you might notice something unexpected. They're still speaking, through the shape of a mouth on basalt, through the grooves in a jade figurine, through the shared hush of a clearing where nothing's been built for 1,000 years. And they're not shouting, they're whispering. You press your palm lightly against the side of the head. The stone is cool, even now. You wonder how many hands have done this before you, how many others found this same spot, in this same hush, and sat in the same wondering. Maybe the stone remembers. You lie back in the grass, arms folded behind your head. The sky above is endless now, full of stars with names no one uses anymore. Somewhere, far away, a jaguar slips through the trees, careful and unseen. And the head watches, not judging, not demanding, just present. A monument to something no one can quite define, but everyone feels. A culture not erased, but absorbed into stories, symbols, and a quiet kind of resilience. Tomorrow the forest will move on. Leaves will fall, roots will grow, rain will come. But for now, everything is still. Everything is listening. And here, in the hush of the jungle, beside a half-buried face, and under a galaxy that the Olmec once traced with their eyes, you fall into sleep. The jungle fades gently now. The trees, once vivid, dissolve into soft silhouettes. The stars shimmer more quietly above you, their sharpness softened into slow glints. The wind barely rustles the leaves, just enough to remind you that the world is still breathing. You're not walking anymore. You're floating. The stone head is behind you now, its features blurred by distance and time. But you still feel its presence, gentle, calm, watching without watching. Your thoughts begin to slow, one by one, like leaves drifting to rest on still water. No need to understand everything. No need to solve the mystery. The Olmec didn't leave a note, but they left enough. Enough to wonder, enough to imagine, enough to dream. And here, that's more than enough. Let yourself drift now. Let the forest hold you. Let the ancient silence wrap around your shoulders like a soft woven blanket. No jaguars tonight. No ball games. No rituals. Just you, a few crickets, and the slow, steady rhythm of the dark. The story pauses here, not ended, just resting, waiting for someone else to find the next stone, the next smile, the next small breath of history. And so, with a final sigh, you settle deeper, into calm, into quiet, into sleep, sweet dreams.